Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
BETT UK is just 2 weeks away. Are you ready to join 30,000 attendees, 600 plus exhibitors on 7 content stages from 120 countries and see Louis Theroux, Dame Darcy Bustle, Jason Arde, Laurel Kana, Baroness Floella Benjamin, Dan Fitzpatrick, Mr. PICT and so much more? I might need to bring my trainers. The best part? Educators go free! Get your ticket now at uk.bettshow.com/visitor-registration.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Introducing Eton X from Eton College, a diverse range of quality online courses enabling young people to aspire and excel. Designed for self-study, these web-based courses empower your students with essential leadership, communication, and academic skills for success at school and beyond. Our Study Skills course sharpens their learning abilities, while the AI Fundamentals course equips them with vital digital know-how in a fast-changing world. Other popular courses include verbal communication, critical thinking, writing skills, resilience, creative problem solving, and many more. Offer the Eton X curriculum in your school for free. Visit etonx.com to find out more.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. Thanks for clicking play or joining us live, whichever you are doing. Thank you very much and welcome. This evening, we are doing a show focused on most common, I guess, teaching strategies or things that we do in our teaching and looking for sort of advice, tips, guidance on those most commonly used elements in teaching. Some of the things we're going to explore tonight are things like feedback, modeling, use of visualizers, mini whiteboards. We are going to talk about retrieval practice. We're going to talk about activities, the whole idea of pace in lessons. We're going to sort of go through a ton of things, and this all sort of emanated from a social media post that I put out 10 days ago now. What is the teaching idea or resource that you use most often in your teaching? And it got a really sort of interesting range of responses. And the focus of this show is built around those responses and what people said. So I've got a series of guests. I've got Jill, I've got Sarah, I've got I only know him as oh yes, is it Joe? Oh, I'm not sure actually. It could be Joe. I thought I had Joe. Maybe, I don't know. This is how well prepared I am. And I've also got Kate Jones as well. After 8 p.m. Who is going to be joining us as well to talk about some of this stuff. So really exciting stuff and lots to sort of get through. So just before I kick off, it'd probably be good for me to mention our supporters on the show this evening. So one of our key sponsors and supporters is John Catt. If you haven't heard of them, they're an educational publisher and they publish professional development books and resources for teachers around the world. If you haven't had a chance to check out their latest releases, you can do so at johncattbookshop.com and you can get 20% off everything that you order in there by using JCTTR2324 as a code. That's JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order with John Catt. And yeah, have a look because they've got so many titles. And in fact, we have a John Catt author with us tonight in Kate Jones. So we'll be talking about some of her books that she's written with John Catt. Also, we are going to be at the BETT Show next week, so it's worth me mentioning that from next Wednesday to Friday, if you are in London or if you live around London and you want to meet us, as in when I say us, I mean like the TTR team. So I'll be there We've got Seema there, we've got Nathan there, we've got Maxine, Hannah, loads more people. Poppy, Marie, Paul Hazard. Yeah, loads of the TTR team will be there at the Bet Show, and it's a 3-day thing: Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We're on stand SM54, so if you do get a chance to pop your head in, then please come and say hi. So yeah, let's crack on with the show. So Jill, I'll just check you're there first. Jill, are you there?
Hi, yeah. Can
I
you hear
can
me?
hear you loud and clear. Do you want to just give us
Brilliant.
like a 30-second introduction of sort of who you
Yeah.
are and what you do?
Yeah, my name's Jill. I'm an assistant head teacher and I lead teaching and learning in my school in South Lakes in Barrow. Um, um, we're an all-through school. We're a very small school. We've got kids from reception right through to year 11. So that makes for an interesting dynamic in the school. And I've been assistant head teacher there since 2019. And I've just survived Ofsted and we got a good.
Well, I'm glad you're relieved about that.
Yeah.
And as long as you're not going to post the banners, Jill, you won't get kicked off the space by me. So yeah.
I'm right with you on that one.
Oh, smashing. Well, that's great. Sarah, we've also got Sarah, hopefully. Sarah, do you want to sort of 30 seconds just introduce yourself as well?
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Fabulous. I teach in Banbury in Oxfordshire. I teach at Blessed George Napier School. I teach year 13 psychology, year 13 health and social care, and some science this year at Key Stage 3. I've been teaching since 2003, so a bit long in the tooth. But it's nice to hear Jill teaching in Barrow because my grandparents are actually from Barrow-in-Furness, so it's great to hear about Barrow.
Oh, brilliant.
Massive shout out for Barrow and other UK towns that are similar. Yeah, big shout out to them. I've just invited Joe in as well, who hopefully Joe can connect up. Joe, you do need to be on your mobile phone to join on the X app. So hopefully we can get Joe involved as well. But Jill, I'll start with you because when I posted this thing out about sort of most commonly used teaching strategies or techniques, you very kindly replied to that. And you particularly mentioned mini whiteboards.
Yeah.
And I know that you're a massive proponent of them and you've done a lot of work in your school around mini whiteboard use. So I wondered, because there are those who are cynical about mini whiteboards, not so much in how they can be used, but as a sort of like they've always been around, that sort of thing. Like they've always been around and, it's no real big deal, if you like. It's not a big deal to use mini whiteboards. I mean, how do you use them then? And, why are they your most commonly used teaching resource or idea?
Well, I've become known as the queen of the mini whiteboard in my school. I think they're just a fantastic tool. Sometimes it's the tried and tested things that have been there for years and years that do the job and they do it brilliantly. I think coming back from the pandemic, one thing that I think probably a lot of us have felt is how many kids are just hiding away in plain sight in the classroom. They don't want to speak. They don't want to put their hand up. They don't want to be seen. I think they metaphorically still been under the duvet for quite a while, and the mini whiteboard just gives everybody that opportunity to engage in the classroom. There's no hiding space. Everybody joins in. The risk is shared amongst all the kids in the classroom. And I think if you build the culture of the mini whiteboard well in your class, there's actually a lot of kids that are quite thankful for you using the mini whiteboard because it does give them a voice. It does give them an opportunity to engage and take part in that lesson, but perhaps in a way that isn't as I don't know, as difficult for them when they've struggled, perhaps coming back to the classroom after that pandemic experience.
Yeah. I mean, can you give me an example of sort of maybe 1 or 2, 3 generic ways you use a mini whiteboard in your teaching, or that other people you work with?
One of my favourite things that I love about the mini whiteboard is something that I call them magpieing. I think I learnt the magpie technique from the primary school at our school, and brought that up into the senior school. So when I get kids to write ideas down, I teach English, by the way. So I might be reading a passage and I might say, what feelings do you think this character has in this moment? Write down 2, 3 things on your whiteboard. Everybody does that, but then I ask everybody to magpie. So everybody holds up their boards, they slowly rotate their boards, everybody has a look at what everybody else has written, and then they magpie, they steal other people's ideas and pop that into their exercise books as well. They might change then what they were thinking, they might see vocab they're not used to. It's a really great way of sharing knowledge right around the classroom. So that's definitely one of my favourite techniques with the mini whiteboards.
Brilliant.
What else do I do? I do. We do lots of vocab work as well in English. So we might be reading a passage, and it might say Joe walked from the classroom, and then we might do something like, right, well, can we have a different idea? What other word could we have used instead of walked? And everybody pops up their ideas on the whiteboard, and off we go again, and you can magpie from that too. Um, so I just love how quick and easy it is. There's no you having to get up and walk around and look at people's exercise books. It's immediate, quick, easy, and the impact of it, I think, is really meaningful in the classroom.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, that was my next question is, what is the impact in the classroom of the mini whiteboards and using them more? And what did you do before mini whiteboards?
What did I do before mini whiteboards? Well, I use them hand in hand with my visualizer. I'm a visualizer girl through and through. And what did I do before? PowerPoint.
Nothing
um,
wrong with a good old PowerPoint.
well, each to their own, and I mean that mantra is really important to me actually. But each to their own, and I just I just felt it was clunky and clumsy with the PowerPoint, and with the visualizer and the whiteboards. I feel like it's more of a joint enterprise in the classroom. You sort of, I feel like I'm working more in tandem with the kids rather than them sort of just sat like an audience watching a PowerPoint.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so at any given moment, those whiteboards are there, and I can deploy them, find out information from the kids, share good ideas. Um, I think one of the things that I'm working on at the moment is trying to get kids to use them more independently, away from direct teacher instruction.
yeah,
So that's harder to embed that in the classroom, and it's taking a lot of just a lot of repetition, encouraging them to use those whiteboards for their own personal use rather than just waiting for me to say use it. So they could be, asking them to, if you've got a question you want to ask me, jot it on your whiteboard. If you've got spelling that you want to try it out on your whiteboard first.
yeah,
If
yeah.
you, yeah, they don't naturally gravitate to that, I don't think, as much. So with my own personal classes, that's what I'm trying to develop a little bit more with the whiteboards, because they're very practiced at them otherwise.
And so in terms of routines and stuff, do you
Mm,
have, and I don't just mean
yeah,
sort of like in terms of looking after the whiteboards and making sure they're used correctly and getting them out without
yeah,
having to sort of go through a big rigmarole of getting them
yeah,
all out and getting them all set up. I mean, how
yeah,
long does it take you to get to a point where you're like, right, we're going to get the whiteboards out now? How long
right.
does that process take?
Well, so as my role as T&L lead in the school, oh gosh, how long have we doing on this one? Maybe we've been working on this 18 months, 2 years now.
Yeah.
And there's two parts to this battle. There's the teachers and there's the kids. Sorry, teachers. But the and you're working with two different things here. The first thing is about the routine of the whiteboards, and I mean I've seen so many posts on Twitter where people go back and forth over the routine, the maintenance of these. My first starting point was to insist that whiteboards are out every lesson, no matter what. It's part of your kit, like your pencil case.
Yeah.
We have dear time, and we ask for the kids to have a reading book out as well on their desk. And the first thing I wanted to do was to try and embed that. So I said to the kids, no matter what, regardless of whether your teacher asks you to or not, regardless of whether you think that teacher's going to use that whiteboard or not, you get your whiteboard out and you put it on your desk,
Yeah.
and then they are there, and there shouldn't be, oh right, let's do something with whiteboards, and then suddenly everybody's piling into their bags and you're having to wait 5 minutes for everybody to get a whiteboard out, and then all the drama that goes with that. So that's one thing that we've worked hard on. Um, I I also we're a small school, and I think that really helps us. So in our senior school, from year 7 to year 11, we've got about 300 kids, about 60 or so in a year group.
Yeah.
So I think with us being small, that makes it easier to manage.
Yeah.
They do get minus points for not having the right equipment. That
Yeah.
feeds into the house point system. It's about teaching them responsibility for their equipment, and and again,
Oh, you're flirting with
I know,
pencils, Jill. You're
I
flirting
know.
with pencils here.
I know, I was a pencil gay. I know it. It was. I look at all of those kinds of threads, and I just think it's back to what I said before. Each to their own, and I think nobody knows each other's context of their school. Nobody knows. I don't know what your school's like. You don't know what my school's like, and what works for you might not work for me. And I
Yeah.
think people ought to have the grace in those conversations to accept that people need to manage their schools in the way they need to manage them. We're very lucky in being such a small school that we can work. We know the name. I know the name of every kid. I know those kids,
Yeah.
and we can work with them on that kind of level. I absolutely accept that in bigger schools, the whiteboard can be a difficult challenge. But I think that's up to each school to come up with a process that works for them. And if that's every teacher has a set of their own and gives them out, um, then that's what that school does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the context is important. I mean, the school I currently teach in is a special school, so
Ah, right. Yeah.
we're talking like, I mean, it's all through. So
Ah.
we're talking like probably 200. I mean, I don't know how many pupils are actually in the whole thing all
Mm,
through, but it's not many. Whereas if you compare that to the school I was teaching in before this, that was
mhm.
your typical sort of secondary comp with 900 students.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of by the way, I wasn't a leader in either of those schools, but if I was a leader in either of those schools, the idea of introducing something new to all staff would be very different in the way I would probably feel about it.
Mhm.
In terms of feeling very daunted. I mean, even the numbers you've got, Jill, in your
Mhm.
school, it would still, it's still a real challenge, isn't it, to introduce
Yeah.
anything consistently across?
Yeah. Always.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
want to ask. I'm just going to go to Sarah and Joe, and obviously they've got different things that I'm going to be asking them about. But Sarah, I wondered before I ask you about your stuff, I wondered whether you had any views on mini whiteboards or anything that Jill said.
I don't really have any particular views on mini whiteboards.
No.
I'm quite nomadic, so I'm in more than one classroom.
Oh God.
So, and yeah, I mean, last year I was in a comical 19 different classrooms.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was in different rooms every lesson, so I would have found that quite difficult. But this year I'm in fewer classrooms, and I know I've got a set of mini whiteboards somewhere
Mhm.
in my cupboard. But my main teaching is advanced level. So I teach a lot of year 12 and year 13,
Yeah.
which is why I'm the queen of the visualizer. I'm very, very much about, scaffolding and modelling and making that transition from GCSE to A level. So I'm not, I feel like I'm on the fence and I'm going to get run over, but but I have no real view about it. I'm willing to give
That's
anything
fine,
a
Sarah.
go
You
once.
are allowed to not have a view on it. It's absolutely fine. And also the fact that, I mean, when I was teaching during COVID, I don't think I had 19 classrooms, I have to say, but I think I had like,
Right.
I don't know, 8 or something. And yeah, I mean, I used to carry the whiteboards in the trolley, but honestly, the way I am, I lost half the blooming pens or whatever by the end of each day. Never mind week. I was going, well, there goes another 10. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Get them out once, pack them up once, move classrooms, they drop out. I mean, okay, that's an extreme example because, you know, COVID was COVID and you were walking down a corridor with a blooming trolley half the time. So it was slightly different. But yeah, it does. I think you do have to be sort of committed to it and organised with it and sort of onto it and with it. But if you can do that, I think it's great, as Jill said. So Sarah, I wanted to ask you about modeling and visualizers, because you're a big fan of the use of visualizers and the idea of modeling. So I wanted to start with, can you tell, because we've got listeners from all over the world who listen back to this as a podcast, so can you tell them what we mean by modelizing? That's a new word. I will copyright it. And yes, it will trend. Modelizing. What does the word model mean in a teaching context? And what is a visualizer? Let's start with some definitions.
Okay, so I'll start with what a visualizer is. So a visualizer is basically a fancy camera that you plug in and acts like a camera on what you're writing underneath. So I am very lucky in that my head of department bought me a Hue visualizer, and they're really compact, they're really easy to move around. So I used it in all different lessons when I'm in all different classrooms because I just carry it in my backpack. It's really nice and light. And what I use my visualizer for is to show students what a good one looks like. So I've got Year 12, Year 13 psychology, and Year 12 and Year 13 health and social care. So I teach 2 different subjects, and I've also got Key Stage 3 science, so biology, chemistry and physics. And what I tend to do with that is I'll start off an exam question and I'll say, right, outline and evaluate. What does this verb mean? What does that verb mean? And we have the conversation. And then I say, right, so how would we put that answer together? Where would the outline go? Where would the evaluate go? How many marks is it? How much do you think you would write? And before I've even started showing them how I would think and how I would write, we spitball it first. So if we can say it, we can write it. And I use that visualizer to go, right, okay, so let's write out the 4 markers. It's a 4 marker in an A-level psychology question. I have this great big exercise book that I just kind of borrow from the prep room, and it becomes mine for the year. Don't tell my head department. Hopefully he's not listening.
We won't. Rebel. You're like Theresa May right now, like running through those fields. You absolute rebel. Go on, Sarah. Carry on.
One exercise book taken from the prep room, and what I do is I start doing the answer with them. So what I will do is I will narrate what I write. So it's what I call a cognitive apprenticeship. So if they come from GCSE straight away and they've never done psychology or health and social care before, because we don't offer them at BTEC first, and we don't offer psychology at GCSE. So it's 2 brand new subjects. And if you give a student, a year 11 plus 6 weeks, essentially, that's what year 12s are. If you give them a 4-mark advanced level question and they've got a blank page, they start to get a bit sweaty and they look a bit nervous. So what I do is I start to narrate what I write, because not only does that help those who need to be able to hear it, to be able to process it, but it also allows me to show them my thought process, so I can verbalize my thought process. I can. So
just to sort of clarify for everyone, you're sat there at the front. You've got your visualizer. Yeah. By the way, there are lots of brands of visualizers.
Other visualizers are available. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got your visualizer. You've got your projector going.
Yeah.
You're writing an answer. And this idea of narrating it is you're writing the answer, but you're almost explaining as you're writing what you're thinking. And I've done exactly the same thing in history. It's very powerful stuff. As long as you can come up with something half decent. Because if you can't, then they're like he's stuck. Yeah. He's
I'm very lucky. And I've been teaching a long time, Tom. So I've got a bank of lots and lots of questions. So what I've done is, after I've written them, I take a photo of them, using the camera function on the laptop, it then saves it and I can upload it to our VLE.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Yeah.
we have folders that say, year 12 model answers, year 13 model answers, and then I filter them by, each topic. So this is your schizophrenia folder, this is your social influence folder, so on and so forth.
Got you. So let's say, sticking on the idea of your 4-mark one, does it take too long for you to, because listen, I mean, no one's going to argue that the idea of modeling is excellent. It's great. The one thing that I found, and this is only me talking personally, there's no like massive educational research body behind this, is that sometimes it can take quite a long time to do that well. If you're going to sort of model and narrate to them and really get into that, of course, the counter to that, I'm sure, will be, well, it's time well spent. But I wondered whether, how long does it take you to do this as opposed to just giving them a model answer?
Okay, so a 4-marker would probably take me between 4 and 8 minutes.
Okay.
It should only take me 4 minutes, really.
Yeah, because it's only like 2-3 sentences, isn't it? Or something
yeah. So it should be, the premise of a mark a minute in your advanced level for the size of the paper. That's what it should be. If I'm narrating and I'm having discussions with the students, we can go up to 8-10 minutes. But like you say, I think it's time well spent, because I'd rather they had that really solid, A grade answer, rather than I gave them 8 minutes and they spend 4 or 5 of those minutes going, what are we supposed to be doing? How do I start? Can you give me a sentence?
Yeah.
Because some students in that transition, and even from when they transition from 12 to 13, there's a step up again from year 12 to year 13, and they need kind of resetting, rebooting almost of how to start those answers and how to structure them, because the year 13 work, the year 13 paper is different to the year 12 content, and just gets harder and harder and harder. So you're just kind of building on skills. I mean, I have been known to sit and model the really big answers as well, so the 16 markers, the essays, and they'll take me a good hour, but they've got then a really excellent Mark Band 4 A-star answer that they can take to the bank, and they can say, right, I can apply that now to another theory or another piece of research, and I can do that no problem.
And presumably, do they get in? I'm guessing they're involved throughout this. They're sort of saying, why don't you write this, or I don't like that, or whatever. How do they get involved in it as you're doing it?
Well, another thing that I tend to do is it's really important to introduce the vocabulary. So having taught for a long time, having taught for 20 years, I can see that some students just don't have the cultural capital that they had back in, the early 2000s.
That was me clapping 20 years, but a little bit too late. You can't have everything. Carry on, Sarah. That was me giving you a round of applause for teaching for 20 years.
Yeah, teaching 20 years. Like I say, I'm probably some kind of sadist or masochist. I don't know which. 25 years to go.
Brilliant.
But I forgot what the question was. Sorry.
You were talking about how they got involved in the process of modelling.
Oh yes, that's right. So what we do is they introduce vocabulary to me, or I say, oh, what should I be writing here? And they go, validity, and I go, yeah, but what does that mean? And they'll go, it means this, and I go, oh, okay. And I get the back and forth that way. But also I try and build up their vocabulary and use words that they might not use in their writing otherwise.
Got you.
Yeah. Nice. So try and use the vocabulary that I've developed as a woman in my 40s, and get them to be writing more sophisticated answers.
Yeah, brilliant. Wow. And I mean that's and how often do you use that sort of modeling routine? Are you using that every lesson? Are you using that every other lesson? I mean, where does it fit in within your, let's say you've got, you obviously need to explain things, you need to do some question and answer, you need to do, where does it fit in there?
So it's not every lesson, and it's not, sometimes I'll be modelling with year 7, for example, because I'll give them out a worksheet and they won't know where to start. So I'll have to get the visualizer out and go, oh, going to have to get Hugh out because Hugh's going to have to help us out. And I do that with year sevens. I would say probably once every 3 lessons, so at least twice a week with my A-level classes, and probably once a week with my year sevens and year eights, maybe.
Got
So
it.
it's not every lesson, because I don't want to wear my visualizer out, because
No.
that would be terrible.
And Lee has messaged in saying, I love modelling. It's very adaptive to all levels in the classroom. I do, we do, you do is the concept I use in all lessons. Can anyone explain I do, we do, you do? I mean, I think I know what that means, but does anyone want to add anything to that?
Are you
I
asking
do,
me
we
or
do,
asking
you
everyone?
do. I mean, that's I do it.
Yeah.
You do it.
Yeah. So I think with modelling, I do the answer.
Yes.
But what because sometimes I could sit there and be like, right, we're not going to say a thing. I'm going to really listen. Now we're going to really focus, because some students need absolute quiet to be able to focus and to be able to make sense of this. And I will do it completely silently. And I've been known to do that
cool.
as well.
That's, yeah. No, that's cool.
And then I go, right, okay, so I've done that one. Now we're going to do this different one on a different theory, because we did the content lessons before. Now you're going to do that one. And we're going to do a competition to see who finishes first. So I will turn off my camera, but they'll see me writing ferociously. And we'll see who has the better answer at the end.
Nice. I like it. Nice.
So a wee little competition.
I've also got Joe. I'll come back to you, Sarah and Jill, as well. Joe, if you want to sort of introduce yourself, just 30 seconds, tell everyone about you.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for the invitation this evening. I am an English teacher in Scotland, and I have been at this for about 12 years now. And I teach in a school which has kind of variety of challenges, you might say, with regards to pupils being on the kind of lower end of the socioeconomic scale. So we have a lot of issues and challenges in the school as a consequence of that. But I like the challenge, and I don't think I would want to work in a different environment now. I believe that's called institutionalization, but there we go. And yep, that's basically what I do. But a lot of what Sarah was saying there about the modelling and the visualizer, absolutely, I couldn't agree more. It does have that kind of level of impact and utility. So, yep, that's what I'm all about.
Brilliant. And I know you commented on my original thread, and you gave sort of a specific example of modelling writing at the level relevant to learning with commentary. And that sort of thing. So I wondered whether you could talk us through a process that you use when it comes to this idea of modelling and using whiteboards or whatever it is, and how you go about that.
Absolutely. I mean, I enjoy writing. Like it's something my students, when I discuss this with them, and I tell them about my love of writing and doing it for pleasure and enjoyment, they look at me, flabbergasted and aghast. So I like the opportunity to do it and to speak about it and give it, as Sarah said, a running commentary on what I'm doing and what my thought processes are as I'm doing it. So I do like doing that. I like the whole process of it. I'm very fortunate in my classroom to have a very large whiteboard. So if I am modelling to the class, and it's not necessarily something that I would wish for them to, I need for them to take a record of or take a copy of, then I would use a whiteboard, and that would be up there for them, either to annotate or to choose and select the relevant ideas from. But the visualizer really comes into its own when I want to work on, or I want to encourage the young people to, and I mean, that's going to sound super basic, but even just to work on the fine motor skills involved in writing and the presentation on a page, for example, proper headings, proper spacings, proper paragraphing. So I'll have a jotter, the same as the kids have got, which I'll have underneath the visualizer, and I will invite them to copy down and to imitate what I'm presenting on the page using the visualizer. So that at the most fundamental levels, I think that it encourages and develops and builds into their routines this idea of, okay, we sit down, we have this blank page, which I think was mentioned earlier, a lot of young people can find intimidating. And what we'll do is, listen, here is how we will systematically go through presenting something of a reasonable quality on the page, and really kind of build that in as part of our routines. With regards to the content, what I like to do is, well, it depends on what we're studying on any given day. There's a heavy emphasis in the National 5 and in the higher here in Scotland on paraphrasing. So what I like to do is to model a paragraph and then have the young people paraphrase 4 ideas or 5 ideas from the paragraph. Now, in order to kind of drive their engagement with it, so they feel they're kind of involved in the process, I'll ask for a recommendation or ask for a suggestion for a theme or a tone, and I will then write a paragraph on that. And the kids, I mean, I love doing that, like being on the spot and producing something. I have somewhat of a formula that I do follow, but the young people, they always try and chance their luck, and they're like, oh, well, let's see how good this guy is actually at writing. So with this week alone, I've written a paragraph on the utility of fairy liquid, the different uses of pineapples, the rising popularity of sports, combat sports video games. What was another one? Oh, how horses have been treated historically. So and I'll write the passage, and I'll generally keep it to about 4 or 5 sentences long. And then what I'll ask the young people to do is, okay, now we're going to take a copy of that Marjotter, we're going to move to the visualizer, and then I'll have them paraphrase the 4 or 5 ideas that I have written into the passage. We then do a kind of classroom-wide assessment of the paraphrasing. Sometimes I'll invite them, you know, if you have a trusted partner close to you, there's a wee opportunity to do some peer assessment, or a little miniature tiny leadership opportunity for the young person to come up and actually put their work onto the visualizer and talk us through their justifications for how they paraphrase certain things. So it's fantastic for that. And by the end of that, let's say let's say it was a paraphrasing activity, by the end of that, they have what good looks like. So that in the future, when we go back to that particular skill, I'll be able to say, right, guys, go back to your jotter, look for the heading that says paraphrasing, have a look at that. That's what good looks like. And sometimes I'll even mix it up, and I'll get down with the kids with the Gen Z vernacular. So if they do it later, I'll say, does your work have the same vibe as that one? I'll even go to say, has the same energy? Is it filled with the same rizz? So, and they get that it's all variations in the same thing. So that's for example how I would use it. Going to analysis, it would be simply identical in terms of the methodology. Only the focus of the questioning would change. And again, I would model what a good answer looks like. And this would be for approximately level 3 in Scotland, which would be a level we would be hoping for all young people to have achieved towards the end of S2 and the kind of beginning of S3. So that's how I would use it. I've used the visualizer for other things, but I don't want it to ramble on here and take other people's time.
Nice, really interesting. I was going to ask you, like, when did you start in your sort of career?
Yeah.
Have you always had that approach with modelling, or is that something you've like adapted into and done more of as time's gone on?
Yeah, no, it's something I have always been the someone who's just been such a fan of modelling. I mean, I used to love watching my English teachers writing things. To me, it was like some sort of magic, man. You know, like they would just be able to create these texts in front of you, and I envied their access to the vocabulary, and it was just I just thought my English teachers in particular, I was very fortunate in secondary school. I had 3 of they're totally different people, but three of just the most inspirational people you can that maybe in my life, and I was like, man, I want to do that. I had a kind of natural ability with it, and so they recognised that and nurtured that. And I told them that I live in a fairly small town here in Scotland, and I see them fairly, regularly, but I do see them, and I have, I'm gushing in my appreciation for them. But it's always something I've done. But the visualizer, definitely, man, that is such a good tool. And during lockdown, especially, I have that IPEVO visualizer, and I actually started to use it. I was answering the same. I was having to address the same things repeatedly during lockdown. So I was like, I'm going to make YouTube videos that cover these
things,
recurring things, recurring inquiries. So I made those with the visualizer. It records video too. That was fantastic. Very useful. And I would do the live lessons during lockdown for my certificate classes, my National 5 and higher classes. So it was fantastically useful for that. Also, just on that note, and please stop me, Tom, if I'm
No, you go.
What I also find very useful, especially in senior phase, is I think it's very useful for the kids to know what the marking instructions look like for the summative assessments, for the SQA assessments, and the visualizer lets you put someone's script next to the marking instructions, and to talk them through, here's the rationale for with regards to the assessment. Here is how this work is successful, or here's what it's missed, and for them to see that, I think that can be very enlightening to them, and just explaining that marking process. So it has that use as well. I took a little note there. An earlier question about how often do you use it, and I tend to use it because of the reason I use it, and as I explained earlier, why I use a visualizer and how I use it. It tends to be I use it heavily earlier in the academic year, but later they have the what good looks like, maybe one or two examples. So I don't necessarily have to use it so often for that purpose. So it then transitions into later. It's kind of later in the academic year, it transitions into here's how things are assessed, and also for the kind of presentation of answers, especially answers that are kind of multifactored, that have the different aspects to them, like a more complicated answer. So in Scotland, maybe the commonality question in the National 5 or higher paper, that's part of the Scottish text component. It's an 8-mark question. It's fairly complex in what they're asked to do. They're asked to analyse a pattern of ideas within an extract and more broadly in a body of text. So it becomes very useful for that.
Perfect.
Great.
Listen, Joe, I'm going to bring you back in. I'm going to bring Kate in now. Obviously, Jill, Sarah, and Joe are also sort of here. So, Kate, good evening.
Hi, can you hear me okay, Tom?
Can hear you loud and clear. Now, I was counting earlier. You can do your own introduction, but I was counting earlier. I think you've now written 13 books.
No, 32. It's not. It's 8 books published, edited 1, and writing some more. Yeah,
that's ridiculous. So, listen, I'll give you 30 seconds to introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Okay, history teacher. I've taught in the UK. I've taught internationally. Authored a few books, like Tom said. I now am senior associate for teaching and learning with evidence-based education, but I'm actually on maternity leave. I have a 6-month-old baby, so that's what's going on with me right now.
Smashing. And listen, I have to ask you, Kate, first. Well, also, it's probably a very good time for me to say that many of your best-selling books were produced through John Catt. And a big shout out to John Catt, who are also a sponsor on tonight's show with TTR. So if you want to get yourself 20% off any books written by any John Catt author, including Kate's books on retrieval practice, then you can head over to the John Catt website, which is johncatbookshop.com, and you can use the code JCTTR2324, and you can get 20% off any of Kate's John Catt books. Tell me your John Catt books. We got the retrieval series plus the assessment feedback.
Yeah, so my first, most of my books have been with John Catt. The first one is Love to Teach. That's a range of teaching and learning strategies and research and so on. Then there's 4 retrieval practice books. There's one specific for primary. There's one that's just a resource guide with ideas. Then I've authored one of the in-action books, so everyone can get a discount on all the in-action books. This is something Tom Shevington started with Rosenshine's Principles in Action, and my book is about Dylan William and Siobhan Leahy's Formative Assessment in Action. And then recently I edited the Research Ed Guide to Cognitive Science, and the Research Ed Guides are so good. There's a Research Ed Guide to curriculum, assessment, education myths, loads, great books. So that's a really good deal because John Catt books are already cheap, like good price. So
yeah, cost effective, not cheap.
Sorry.
Cheap, not cheap.
Cheap is all
Not
good,
a cheat.
sorry.
It is a cheat. It's a cheat of a deal.
No, I said cheap, not cheat.
I know, I said cheat because I'm an idiot. So I was going to ask you, so far we've talked about, so we started talking about mini whiteboards. So Jill is a big enthusiast of mini whiteboards. She's telling about us how she uses it in a classroom. And then we've also talked about modelling. So I wondered whether sort of mini whiteboards, visualizers and modelling, whether you've got any sort of thoughts or any sort of nuggets of knowledge you want to share on any of those.
Yeah, well, sorry I missed it. I've literally just delivered a webinar to teachers in Ireland, and that webinar was teaching and learning workload friendly strategies, basically low effort for the teacher, high impact for the student. And I did mention whiteboards, and I know they've been around for ages, and people say, God, why are you all talking about whiteboards? It's nothing new. But it is because they can be so brilliant in the classroom. Now, I understand, I've met lots of teachers, and probably I was like this in the beginning, that they seem like a faff because the pens run out, and there can be students writing on them when they shouldn't write on them, and they might draw inappropriate things. But you can get around all of those things, if you with your behaviour policy, by modeling how to use a mini whiteboard, when you are expected to use them, when you're not to use them. And a school I often tweet about, and this is a primary school, Stanley Road Primary School in Oldham, Manchester. I went to visit it, and I love that school. It's amazing. Andrew Percival is one of the school leaders there. And the way they are with mini whiteboards in that school is just so effortless. The teacher will say, right, mini whiteboards, and they'll answer, and they all show their answers. Then they put them away, and they just dip in and out of them all the way throughout the lesson. And it can be to check for understanding, to check for accuracy. You can have a short answer that you can then get someone to elaborate on and discuss, or it could be for retrieval practice from long-term memory. So they're really versatile, and I'm also, like Jill, a big fan of them. And I think the teachers who perhaps are not a fan, I think it might be worth revisiting and reconsidering because they have so much potential in the classroom. And you can,
definitely. I mean, the only sort of negative we sort of came up with, I guess, well, I say negative, the only barrier that we came up with is sometimes if teachers need to move classes, like 20 times or something, it could be challenging, or someone's just disorganized like me and has like a trail of whiteboard pens anywhere they go, like a snail, but like the trail is actually whiteboard pens dropping out of a case or something. So anyway, Kate, I wanted to ask you about so we're going to go through a few things really. I wanted to ask you, because this show's all about teaching tips. So if I was to say to you, if I asked you to sort of condense everything down and say to me, if this was your last 5 minutes on Earth, and somebody came up to you and said, Kate, we've only got 5 minutes left, what are your top 2 or 3 teaching tips that you think are indispensable for someone to hear from you? Then what would they be?
I love the drama of that. But it would be this low effort, high impact approach. and Joe Kirby's written about, and other people, about hornets and butterflies. Butterflies are things that are low effort for the teacher, have a high impact on student workload. Basically, at the start of my career, I was constantly making cards and games and activities, printing, laminating, cutting. We all did it, we all sort of did this. And we did it with really good intentions, that we wanted to make these fun resources and activities for the students. And I would just say to teachers, and this is what I do now, is to really think about how you're spending your time, and spend your time, effort and energy really carefully and wisely, and think about the question design and the explanations that you're providing, more so over the task and the activity. So I think that would be, and the main one really would be, and I get it. I used to love making activities and resources. I used to love that, and some teachers do really enjoy that. But actually, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it worth spending all that time squeezing for some little bit of juice? Spending all that time when the kids are going to solve something in 30 seconds, and it didn't challenge them, it didn't make them think hard. It's not something they'll remember for the right reasons later on. So that low effort, high impact mantra. And then the other thing is recycle, reuse your resources as well, and your activities and your questions. So if you're asking some questions in a quiz based on today's lesson, because you're checking for understanding before you move on, then recycle those questions and ask them again at a later date for retrieval practice. And then ask them again at a later date for retrieval practice. Because we used to just do things where we would use something once, we'd say, right, that lesson objective has been achieved, let's move on. And I'm not going to revisit that until perhaps they've got an assessment on it, and then I'll remind them about it, but they've forgotten it. So it's just having these question banks that you use at different points in the learning process, and you recycle them. You might use the same questions in a Kahoot quiz, or with mini whiteboards, or for multiple choice, or maybe you just give the same quiz. And if the student's saying, why are we doing this again? Then you explain to them why, that they forget things.
Yeah. Sorry, that was me just flushing the squeezed juices down the toilet. The thing that I wanted to ask you regarding that was, if you were to choose a task or activity, for example, that you, and again, I know we hate sort of generic things and all that jazz. I get that. But again, you've got 5 minutes.
I hate generic, Tom. I don't like it when people say generic is a dirty word, because I taught you 5 to 13, and I taught year 5 to 13, and every year in between. So I didn't have 3 year 9 classes. I had year 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. My workload was ridiculous, and I couldn't plan a lesson and then teach that lesson 3 times that week. So I made some templates and resources that I could use with different year groups, and I could use with different topics. The reason that I could use them is because the content would be different. And when they do bash teachers, and people do, and I remember hearing somebody saying, generic is really bad, it's not part of a knowledge-rich curriculum, and blah, blah, blah. And I just thought, are you a teacher? Because it's not about just making generic tasks to make my life easier, but actually they can work for several reasons. And the generic element of a template might be that you don't provide subject-specific cues, so you are making it more challenging for the students as well. So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, it's a template, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, it's a template that is transferable across lots of different topics, and that's all it is. So, the word generic, I guess, sort of, when you see that word generic, there's almost these negative connotations that actually, in a practical sense, shouldn't really exist, because all we're talking about here is a resource that is transferable, and that shouldn't be looked down upon. It's just, that's what it is. So talking about a resource that you know of that is transferable, if you could only recommend one of those resources that was transferable, and you've obviously created loads in your career yourself, but it might be something else, You know, is there a sort of template or grid or something where you think that's a transferable idea that I think stands out? That's something I'd be using often if I was teaching.
Yeah, and there are lots of versions, but I'm going to give a shout out, and I'm not paid to promote this person, but I'm going to say Adam Boxer's Carousel Learning, because that is a good example of how it can be used with primary and secondary. It can be different topics. You know, if you're a science teacher in secondary and you've got different modules and units, and you can use it in the classroom with mini whiteboards. You can set it as a homework. And lots of people would say, oh, students can't do retrieval as a homework because they'll just cheat. Well, there's ways that Carousel are getting around that, and they do encourage quizzing and flashcards at home. So Carousel is one of many great online tools that
But
we've
I was
got.
thinking more. I was thinking more. And by the way, lots of other companies are available. I was thinking
Yeah,
more
sorry.
along the lines of the actual resource, so the design, the actual task,
Okay.
the thing. You know, that. Whereas I would describe what you've said as the vehicle, the program. I'm talking about an actual individual task,
Yeah.
if you like.
Yeah, okay. I'll give you one then from one of my favorites, and this is one that I came up with called I called it Go for Gold, and basically there's sort of 3 tiers, or you could add more, where you have this is a keyword task essentially. It's about, and you can use it to check for understanding or check for retrieval. So let's just say, Tom, we're teaching year 8 and we're teaching Henry VIII, and I've got my Go for Gold. It's like a table, it's like a grid. There's 3 words that are bronze, and I might even have something, king and religion, and then you have silver, and then I might have Reformation, or monastery, and then I might have gold, and I might have dissolution. I might think more carefully about the words, but they're just off the top of my head. And then I say to my class, right, I'd like you to summarize what we've been learning about, aim to include as many of these key terms as possible. So what you're doing with that is you are encouraging them to use this tier 3 vocabulary, subject-specific terms like monastery, dissolution, and so on. But you're also helping to structure and shape their answer by saying, I'd like you to summarize what we've been learning about, basically saying these are the things you need to include. And the reason why I really like this activity, and I can tweet it and share it for people to see a visual example of it, I like it so much because the students' answers are always of a really good quality. And this is differentiation that doesn't involve 15 different colour worksheets. You've got support for all. So the words that are in the bronze are deliberately easier, so everybody gets this taste of success. And it's great for their confidence and motivation, morale. But everyone is challenged. It's not just me saying, oh, right, here's a difficult word, I'd like you to try it.
Yeah.
And then someone on the table saying, well, can you just try and use the word king and that'll do? Whereas actually everyone is being challenged, and they might use that difficult word and it might not have thought they'd been able to, but they can. And this is about them not just recalling knowledge, but applying that knowledge in either written or a verbal answer. So that one is called it's called Go for Gold, but it's just basically it's just like a support to help students, a little bit like what you're talking about with scaffolding and modelling and so on.
Brilliant. I'll just flip to Sarah if Sarah's still there. Sarah, I'll ask you the same question that I just asked Kate about maybe a teaching resource or idea that if you only had like 2 minutes left to tell someone, what would you tell them about and say, hey, you should use that idea?
I'm going to magpie one of Kate's ideas, having read the retrieval practice book, and it's the template of retrieve something from last lesson, last week, last month, last year.
The challenge grid.
Yeah, the challenge grid. So making sure that you're embedding, long-term memory rather than short-term gains, because the biggest lie people and students tell themselves is, I'll remember that, and they won't. So you always have to practice retrieval. So I'm big shout out to Kate, because I'm a big fan of that book. So I'm fangirling a bit here. But that would be my top tip, retrieval practice, but modeling what they need to retrieve.
Brilliant, love it. Jill, have you got anything you want to sort of, I don't know, something you use a lot? Or...
I think the other thing that I use religiously every lesson is my Do It Now book at the start of every lesson.
Oh yeah.
And I would be hard pushed to abandon that, I think. I love that the kids come straight in, they know what they're doing, and building independence into the tasks that they're doing in those books, like little mini English skills to practice. And I couldn't do without that. I start off the year teaching them explicitly how to the different little tasks that I want them to do, but by the end of the year they're making up their own, and that's just wonderful to see. So yeah, that's one of my favourite things to do.
Lovely. And Joe, if you're still there, is there any resource or idea that it doesn't have to be something you use a lot necessarily, but if you could only tell someone, look, this is, my last ever recommendation, what would it sort of be?
I think I would like to try and make the resources that you're using, if it's modelling, if you're using the visualizer, to try and make them as kind of bespoke to the lesson and as innovative and unique to that particular group of individuals as possible. I know I was being slightly facetious when I described, the various topics that the kids had challenged me on, but 3 and 4 months down the line, when I'll say, right, okay, we're going to do some analysis of imagery, and they'll be like, analysis of imagery, what's that? I don't think we've done that. And then I'll say, don't you remember, the fairy liquid activity? And they'll be like, that's that. So just to try and make it as unique and try and involve them in the process as much as possible, and just to give them that, I believe it makes retrieval that little bit more, a little easier, and makes the recall that a little more slick, if you have invested that kind of creativity when you're doing it in the initial stages.
Brilliant. I want to sort of move on, change course slightly now. Okay, I was going to ask you first about this. So feedback. Obviously, we mentioned your John Catt book there, which is on formative. I think it's formative assessment strategies, but you'll have to correct me on that.
That's it. There's a chapter on feedback in the formative assessment book. Yeah,
that's the one. And I wondered, with regards to feedback and assessment, number one, is there any sort of advice you would give a classroom teacher when it comes to feedback? And I'm thinking of resources, I'm thinking of general advice on it, I'm thinking of maybe 1 or 2 things that someone might not have thought of commonly that maybe they should think about. And also, I was also going to ask you about AI as well, and whether you sort of what you think of the new birth in AI generated feedback.
Right. Okay. Well, I think in terms of feedback, we've obviously gone really wrong with it in the past, writing lengthy comments that sometimes the students don't even read, and then they keep making the same mistake, and then it's also a huge workload issue. And there's been questions: who's the feedback for? Is it something the line manager, inspector, parent wants to see? Where really it is about. And Dylan Wiliam is the best person to follow and read up on terms of feedback, because he says the main purpose of feedback is about improving the learner, not just the piece of work. So great if you improve the work, but if that work has improved, but then they still make the same mistakes, they haven't improved as a learner. And that's why a spell checker or Grammarly, it will improve that document, but it hasn't improved you in terms of your spelling, punctuation, literacy, and so on. But something that I would say to teachers is that peer assessment, I don't think self-assessment as much, but peer assessment has got quite a bad reputation, and understandably so, because it can go wrong. Students can give each other feedback that is not clear, it can be unkind, it isn't helpful. The students then don't value it because they think, well, what do you know? I want feedback from the teacher because they're the expert in the room. But I've done this in my classroom, and if you spend time modeling and telling and showing how to give feedback, and students can get to a point where feedback, monitored by the teacher, but peer critique and feedback can be really, really helpful and have a positive impact. Probably most people are familiar with this, but if you haven't, watch Austin's Butterfly on YouTube. Ron Berger, Ethic of Excellence. Basically, Austin draws a butterfly, and oh, bless, it's okay. You can tell it's a butterfly. By the end, it's a masterpiece, and that's not from feedback from the teacher. That's from feedback from his peers. That is kind, specific, and helpful. The other thing I would say about peer feedback very quickly is a mistake that we often make is students do an extended piece of writing and then they swap books and they give peer assessment. My advice would be get students to peer assess after each paragraph, because if they write their first paragraph and then they swap with their partner, and then the student should use feedback like the teacher would. If the teacher uses literacy codes like SB for a spelling mistake, the student should do that. I would never be unkind to my student and say your handwriting is awful. So therefore, students shouldn't say that to each other. But let's just say they've swapped paragraphs and they've peer assessed it, and they get the book back and their peer has highlighted that they spelt a key word wrong. And they say, your paragraph is quite short, try to extend it and add more detail. And then the next paragraph, they spell that word correctly now. They're not making that mistake 20 times throughout the essay, and they can try and add more detail. And then we've got that immediate impact because it's feedback that they can act on. If they just waited and said, here's my finished essay, and they go, well, you got all these mistakes, you've done all this, and then they don't have the opportunity to act on it. So they might not even read it, they might not engage with it, they might ignore it. But if we can make it actionable and immediate in that sense, then it can be really powerful.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, do you think that sort of not just peer-to-peer feedback, but do you think peer-to-peer learning or peer-to-peer, opportunities, let's say that peer-to-peer opportunities, do you think they're underutilized in the classroom? Do you think they do you think they could be utilized more than they are? Do you think that they aren't because of behavior challenges, or maybe they're just not fitting with the sort of approaches that some that are out there? I mean, do you think that's an underutilized area?
Well, it's because it's difficult to get right. Even if we think about Think, Pair, Share, and apologies for the name dropping, I wrote an article with Dylan William, so that was like, sorry about that. But we give advice about Think, Pair, Share, and I do think there's some great advice in there. And we talk about don't skimp on the think. So don't say, right, Think, Pair, Share, talk to your partner. Gotta have that think time. But we also give advice about the pair time, because again, this could go completely wrong. They might just have a chat about something they saw on Snapchat, or one person might completely dominate that conversation. But there are things that you can do. You can structure it. So you might say, right, in pairs, 1s and 2, it depends on the age, of course, of your students, but you might say, right, in pairs, number yourselves 1 and 2. Right, 1, I'd like you to tell your answer to 2, and 2, you listen. And then now, 2, I'd like you to respond to that and tell them what your initial answer is, if you agree, if you disagree, and 1, you have to listen. And John Hattie's written about this, that students can only learn from each other if they listen to one another. And you might have to hold them to account and say, right, can you tell me what your partner told you? And did you agree with your partner? And then how did you respond? So peer work, whether it's pair, whether it's groups, is not easy to do. And I can understand why teachers might want to avoid it, because students might think, oh yeah, let's have a little bit of a chat, waste a bit of time. So it's hard for the teacher. But as I said, it can be very powerful. It can be effective. It's just got to be a lot of guidance, a lot of monitoring and supervision and intervention by the teacher as well.
Brilliant. I'm just going to give a quick shout out to some regular listeners here. We've got Mr. Das is listening to a lot of TTR things, so thank you very much for doing that. We really appreciate that. Dale as well is often here. Jenny, we've got Shell, Kirsty, Helen, ICE, and a few other people listening that aren't visible. So thank you very much, everybody. And we've had lots of people sort of dipping in and out as well. It's been great. So yeah, I'll just go to Jill then on feedback. We didn't ask Kate. Kate, I wanted to ask you about AI. I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on AI first, and when it, particularly with feedback, and whether you think it's, is it a good thing? Are there any pitfalls? Is it something that should be embraced? What's the score with that?
I think just like self-assessment, peer assessment has to be monitored by the teacher. I think AI should be monitored by the teacher as well. It can absolutely help us with workload, but it's something we've got to keep an eye on. We've got to quality assure it. But I've been using technology for years that marks work for me with quizzes, with Google Forms, with Kahoot or whatever. But I still then, even though it'll mark it for me, I then, quizzes.com, for example, gives you a spreadsheet, just green if they got it right, red if they got it wrong. I then still, look at that and engage with that, make a note of it. But it's just saved me loads of time. So I think technology, it's got huge potential in terms of teacher workload, but we have to be careful because we've already seen lots of people are sharing examples of AI, and there's just some things that are not quite, should we say, up to scratch and not 100% reliable. So there's still a lot of questions hanging over it, but it's definitely something that has huge potential for the classroom. And I know Emily is here, and she's using AI, ChatGPT, and things like that. So teachers are being really creative with it, and I think that's really impressive.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, Emily. I didn't even mention you earlier. Sorry about that. Good evening to you. Jill, do you have any thoughts on what we were talking about in terms of AI feedback? Anything that you use in class that you avoid, or anything like that? Pitfalls. I'm interested in pitfalls. I love pitfalls.
Pitfalls. Well, interestingly, Kate, we're just about to start the Embedding Formative Assessment project, obviously that's come from Dylan Williams. In fact, we've got our very, very first session on Wednesday. So I'm hugely looking forward to implementing this into school. But I will admit, the bit that I'm most nervous about is the peer assessment. And when we first looked at the programme, I almost backed away from it when I saw that he's a big advocate of peer assessment, because it frightens me a bit for all the reasons that you've outlined. The worry of the kids not using that time productively, and as you say, talking about Snapchat and whatnot. But I know Dylan knows his stuff, and I'm ready to get behind him and learn what he's got to teach me about that. So maybe Tommy can come back to me in 6 months' time and see how I've got on with implementing peer assessment into my classroom, because I do a little bit of it, but it's I do shy away from it. So that's going to be an interesting journey.
That is going to be an interesting journey.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing. I mean, with group work, or I put sort of peer stuff on a sort of slightly lower tier than group work's like even more ambitious, but even like peer-to-peer stuff is it's a challenge. So it'd be interesting how that works out. But I definitely think, although I think it's a challenge and a very valid consideration, it, as Kate said, I think it has got, there are certain forms of it that carry huge amount of value that, for whatever reason, usually it is to do with behavior. Well, for me, it's always been about behavior. For me, it's been, I need to put as a bigger priority the flow of this lesson, and the sort of the way this lesson's going to go and how it's going to feel for the students. Sound like the Everton manager now. He's always talking about the feel of things, but I definitely think the feel of the lesson is important, and how it goes. So sometimes I will avoid anything slightly more ambitious for that reason, which is like that. So it'd be interesting to see how you get on with that. I think you need those. You need a really secure base to work from to do that.
But then when you talk about the visualizers, which I just, every single lesson I use my visualizer, but again, I shied away from that. I'm your dyslexic English teacher. I can't spell for toffee, and it's always been a huge embarrassment to me. And that's why I didn't want to model, because I was worried about, exposing that weakness in front of the kids. But
Yeah.
I turned that round, and and I knew that the visualizer was the right way to go, and I made myself do it, and I would say it took me a good 12 months to get to a point where I felt I'm really, really comfortable with this now, and it's part of my routine. It's part of the kids' routine, and I think anything new you're going to implement into your teaching pedagogy is you have to give it a chance. You can't just try it a couple of lessons. You've got to give it a really good go over a period of time, and work through those pitfalls that might come along with it. So
No,
really
that's
looking
it. I
forward
mean,
to this next bit.
yeah, I mean, you're absolutely. That's one of the, like, even when I go to write something sometimes on the board, and then I'm like, I get halfway to the board, and I'm like, I don't know how to spell this word, so I'm gonna have to think of another word within the next 0.5 seconds to replace the word I can't spell. Hang on, yeah, I thought of it, and then I'll
Yeah,
use that word instead. How pathetic
yeah.
is that? But yeah,
Well,
we should just, yeah, go on.
it's metacognition, isn't it? And it's being honest with the kids that we make mistakes, we don't know it all, but how do you travel past that when you don't know the spelling? And being honest and saying to the kids, you know what, I'm really not sure, I can't remember, I'm going to check it, and I'll ask Siri on my watch or whatever. And I think that's really important and powerful for kids to see how to navigate getting it wrong and how to navigate making mistakes. And that's an important part of, you're talking about feedback earlier. It's almost giving yourself feedback, and the kids watching you give yourself that feedback and how you take it on board and move forward from it.
Yeah, spot on. Sarah, anything on feedback in terms of teaching ideas or anything that you implement in the classroom with regards to feedback?
So because I've got quite big numbers in A-level psychology, I've got 53 across year 12 and year 13.
Wow.
And I'm a lone teacher.
That's good.
So what I do is when they've done an end of topic assessment, I sit at the same time as them. So
Okay.
yeah, I know.
You're too brave. Get out now, Sarah. Go on. You're too brave for this space.
And then so once they've finished it, I take them in and I see which ones they've not answered very well. So at the moment, I'm marking my end of topic assessments for my year 12s. And they definitely need more work on evaluation and how to structure those paragraphs. So what I'll do is I'll photocopy my answer, and I give them back my answer with theirs once they've marked it. And as part of the feedback process, or what we call green pen work, they go through and they make the changes, or like, bullseye for the 1980s. Here's what you could have won. Here's what you could have won for, what the points that were missing. So I tend to do feedback in that way, and the whole class feedback is really important for me because of having such large numbers. So as I've been marking them as I've been going along, I've been going, well, these have been answered really well, but this particular question, quite a few of you have, not done very well on that. Why do you think that might be? And I do it like that. So I give them verbal feedback as a whole class whilst I'm marking them, because they're forever asking me, have you marked them yet? Have you marked them yet? Have you marked them yet? And I say, well, I'm not Wonder Woman, and it does take some time. So yeah, that's the kind of feedback I do. So
that's great.
You try and cut down my workload a bit, or else, I try and. It's really difficult to get around 28 year 12s by yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, we got sort of moving towards the end now. So my last question was going to be, and I'll start with Jo on this, then I'll go to Kate, and then Jill and Sarah. But my question, Jo, to you and to everyone else is going to be, what would you look to avoid doing in your classroom in 2024? Is there anything where you think, I want to cut that out, or I want to do much less of that in 2024?
Thanks, Tom. I would say, I feel on the spot here now.
I have put you on the spot there.
You're doing the spot, man. Like, it's first time on the show. Right on the spot here.
Do you know, I can come to Kate. Kate,
I'm going
to Kate first. If she could bail you out, Jo, you have a thing.
No.
You're going for it. All right.
I think I already flexed my operating under pressure credentials. I would say that in terms of my own modelling of language, there are certain things that are creeping in that are, and this is going to sound incredibly esoteric, but there are certain things creeping into my spoken language that I wish to eradicate. Like I've caught myself starting. Oh my goodness, I'm cringing even saying this in public. But I've found myself starting sentences with "so," which is a crime, a language crime. I've been working for many years on eradicating the word "very" completely from my vocabulary.
Why? What's wrong with the word "very"?
Oh, very. That's a bad word. That's sinful. That's cheating. That's. I don't like it at all. So I think that trying to improve those things and not allow, I don't know, that to become something that the kids hear me regularly saying. But in terms of like pedagogy, things that I would like to avoid doing. Might I flip the question? Say things that I would like to do more of. That would be a priority of mine.
Okay, well, do you know what? I wasn't expecting you to give that answer, so that's great. That's a really nice start. Kate, have you got any advice to Joe? I'm not saying so or very.
I wouldn't. I've just gone. Oh, so the typical thing. I do think we do that when we get quite relaxed in the classroom. We say things, we have phrases, and sometimes it's a colloquial thing, sometimes local. You know, I've just said, I would say that if that's your biggest concern, then that's not the end of the world, is it? You sound like an amazing teacher. I've really enjoyed everything you've had to say tonight. And about the psychology, being a teacher, marking all that on your own, oh my goodness, and the confidence to say, to sit the paper with them and then share your answers. I wish I'd have done that early in my career, but I just didn't have that confidence to do that. But sorry, what was your question again? Something I would avoid or something, or ditch or something, is it now? Yeah.
Let's do less of that in 2024. No, I'm joking. Compliments are good. I was going to ask, what would you advise, or what would you say, and this could be a more general trend thing for 2024, like what do you think teachers should, in your opinion, do less of in 2024?
I think it's something that's been an issue for a long time. I think it's just, I'm not anti-PowerPoint at all, but I do think it's this reliance on PowerPoint. And the last school when I started, the curriculum was just a series of PowerPoints.
Yeah.
And it was just, and the PowerPoints, being honest, weren't designed well either. They were like your typical sort of PowerPoint that you see on the TES, where, and I'm not meaning to bash the TES because there's some great resources on there, but there are lots of resources that are not of a high quality, and they just sort of tend to have loads of information on it, and they're not, they're not designed with all the principles that we know about working memory, cognitive load theory, and redundancy effect, and so on. So it's not about scrapping PowerPoint. It's just viewing them more as a tool and as an aid, rather than, oh, here's my lesson and it's a PowerPoint. we don't have loads of that.
There's definitely that element in the last, I don't know how long it would, maybe the last couple of years, of like, here's the curriculum, there's 10 files that are PowerPoint, and that's almost like the scheme of work. Like, it's like lesson 1, click these slides through, read it, end of lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I do get about like the idea of simplifying things, and I'm not against PowerPoint per se, obviously, of course not, but there is that element that's crept in of, this is teaching. Now, it may be a form of teaching, but going through sort of slides is that sort of, I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking out loud.
No, well, there are teachers who don't use PowerPoint, and I'd love to see more of those lessons. And I would like to be where I sometimes use it. I don't always use it. And then if we are going to use PowerPoint, if we are a school where everyone's using PowerPoint and there's this expectation that we do, let's have some training then on how to maximize the PowerPoint in the classroom, how to design it so it helps, not hinders learning. But we don't have that. So instead, we just got PowerPoints with like icons, loads of text, and then we just sort of say, yeah, this is the lesson and this is the curriculum. And I do get it, like you, Tom, and it's something that I just sort of, I'd go to plan a lesson, I'd make a PowerPoint, or look if there was an existing PowerPoint out there. So it's not about banishing the PowerPoint, it's just thinking about how we're using them and the role they play and the design with them.
Yeah, got you. Jill, what would you do less of in 2024, do you think? You're going to try and do less of?
That's a toughy question, and I've been sat here while you've all been talking, trying to think of something. What I would like to see less of in my school, is homework. Pointless homework. I think homework should be laser focused, short, sweet, and shows it's got some impact. And if it's not doing those things, then we shouldn't be setting it. And I have tried to do that, I suppose, in my teaching over the last year or so to reduce down pointless homework.
That's a really good shout. That's a really good shout.
Everybody's going to come for me now, aren't they?
No, that's a really good shout. Sarah, anything you would sort of throw in there?
I've had a think, and I think the one thing I'd like to avoid is qualifying myself. So, like Kate was saying about colloquial things that we say.
Yeah.
So often I can be quite underconfident and say, "Does that make sense?" A lot in lessons, and I want to try and avoid that because I do know what I'm doing because I've done it for a long time. So I'm going to try and avoid being underconfident and try and remember that I do know what I'm doing. I think.
Yeah. No, it's fair. But I mean, I say that though. I say that, but I don't necessarily say it because I really think that it doesn't make sense. I just say it as a phrase that I've picked up that I somehow use as like do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like a transition phrase that I use in the lesson. Does that make sense? Right, let's move on.
Yeah.
But it's becoming a joke now with my students. So I'm going to have to try and avoid using it.
It is interesting, the whole language thing. That could be a whole nother show on TTR, like words and phrases that we use that we want to eradicate.
Right. Okay.
Could be a whole new thing. Listen, it's been fantastic. Thanks ever so much, Joe, Sarah, and Jill, Kate as well, for getting involved tonight. It's been great from start to finish.
Tom, might I come in with something?
Yeah, Joe. Sorry, go.
Yeah, man. Thank you. In Scotland, we have teach the National 5 and higher level how to analyse an effective conclusion. It's something that appears often in the National 5 and higher class, and essentially it's asking the kids to identify language or ideas in a concluding part of a text which refer back to the opening of the text, and to show that this implies the ending. So I thought that if we applied that to this evening's discussion, one of the things that I'm absolutely fanatical about is the vernacular. And if we take this conclusion, this ending, back to the beginning with whiteboards, I had written down in my notes here at the side that one of the dangers of whiteboards, whenever I've used them, is the kids are using the whiteboard markers to graffiti, let's say, each other's, your pal next to his shirt or his under his chin or something. And in Scotland, well, certainly in the west coast of Scotland here, this is such a bizarre word, man. But the word chiefied, like a chiefied, is called being chiefied. So, and the kids will say it when it happens to them, and maybe it's a fresh white shirt on a Monday. The kids in all earnestness will say, "Sir, he's just chiefied my shirt." And I'm interested, given that we have a broad representation of the UK here, what is the vernacular word for chiefied where you are?
This is, Joe, this is very niche and perhaps one for another day.
Okay.
Because unfortunately we're out of time, but it's a really interesting one to end on. Your lessons must be so much fun, mate. I can't tell you. I wish I was a student in your lessons.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, guys, it's been great. Massive thanks to John Catt for sponsoring tonight's show. And don't forget to check out their range of books and resources available on the John Catt website at johncattbookshop.com. This, from me, is a good night. But just before I go, massive thanks to Nathan, who's been behind the scenes administrating, and to all of our listeners. I'm sorry I don't know what ICE's actual name is. I just know them as ICE. But again, another regular listener, and also Robbie has joined, and Helen has joined as well. So, and we've also had a lot of other listeners behind the scenes. So, thank you to everybody for tuning in. This will be available as a podcast on the Teachers Talk Radio website, probably tomorrow on the Listen Back page. If you are still wanting more, you can listen live in 2 minutes' time to Ray, who is another one of our amazing hosts. And you can listen to her by clicking Listen Live on the Teachers Talk Radio website. She is genuinely live. It's not just recorded stuff here, people. This is genuine live content. She is going live in 2 minutes' time. And I think she's talking about neurodivergence in teaching in the classroom, possibly, but I could be making that up. But anyway, do check her shows out, because she is fantastic. So thanks very much, everybody. Good night, and see you soon.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.